10 years ago, Nate Diaz seemed like he was about done with the sport of mixed martial arts. He was wildly unhappy with his pay and seemed content with picking up fights on his own schedule, with no clear goal in mind, which meant appearing inside of the octagon once or twice a year. He didn't seem to care about being the champion or getting ahead in the rankings, just showing up, collecting a paycheck that he felt was beneath him, and telling the media how much he hated it there afterwards.
When I fight, I don't get to go to UFCs and hold a mic and, hey, Nate Diaz is fighting and woo. I'm like, I've been here 9 years, you know what I'm saying? And they don't give a when I'm coming back.
And the fans loved him for it. They couldn't get enough of him talking trash and smacking people up inside of the cage, and even more when it happened outside of it. Nate was never the #1 fighter, but due to having a practically uncrackable chin combined with the ability to fight like he barely cared to be in there, he was always one of the most intriguing, and tended to walk away with the moral victory 9 times out of 10. And it goes without saying that jumping on the opportunity to fill in for Rafael dos Anjos and handing Conor McGregor his first loss in the UFC exposed him to a whole new audience of fans and completely changed the trajectory of his MMA career, turning him into a bona fide superstar overnight.
Just keeps getting better. Listen to that crowd. Don't question the superstar power of that man.
He's a needle mover now.
But all of the things that made him so magnetic back then are starting to have the opposite effect now that he's less than a month away from turning 40 and realistically at the tail end of his career. And hearing him talk about how he finally wants to secure a UFC title now just makes him come across as completely delusional and a little bit annoying.
Well, everybody's boring right now, so I'm trying to do other for the moment, but I want to go back and get a UFC title.
So is that in the works right now?
Yeah, well, right now there's nobody that's at an like, I don't really, who's the champion right now? 170. See? Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Would you immediately call out the champion, or is there someone specifically you want to fight?
It's about buzz and who's popping and who's doing something. And right now, there's nobody doing UFC.
I'm a Nate Diaz fan and always will be, but the objective reality is that he wasn't good enough to become champion when he was in his prime. So he's definitely not going to be able to do it now, especially with how much the sport has evolved while his own physical ability has clearly declined. He's looked extremely slow and sluggish for a long time now, getting by on his durability and playing to the crowd while having brief moments that were later clipped out of context, making him look a lot better than he actually was. But if we really get down to the nitty-gritty, all of that is essentially irrelevant, because even if he was somehow physically able to compete, he will never get the opportunity because he committed the cardinal sin of walking away from the UFC to box Jake Paul. And I feel like a lot of MMA fighters don't appreciate how big of a deal that actually is, because a big part of the reason why Dana White hates Jake Paul as much as he does isn't just because Jake has thrown shots at him in the past, but more so because with every former UFC fighter he's beat, he's chipped away at the legitimacy of MMA as a whole, devaluing the sport and making it look weak, low skill, and easy to compete in.
I'm gonna take it from you. I'm gonna show a real fighter. You haven't done this. This is me. Welcome to the sport. Shut the
knuckle boxing.
Literally shut the up.
We both beat 2 UFC world champions.
MMA fighters are meaningless.
Well, Jake,
you guys
I'll
are
give
all
you credit.
pussies.
We equal.
Every single MMA fighters are
wrong.
pussy, and you can't box for shit.
Don't give me
And when I
any
try to
credit.
fight y'all in MMA, y'all don't do it.
And sure, hardcore MMA fans will frame those victories as being illegitimate because the fighters he faced were either too old, too small, or used grappling as their primary form of martial arts. But realistically, it's hard to deny that watching a YouTuber with only a couple of years of boxing training knock out established UFC fighters is a horrible look for the sport of mixed martial arts. The best example of that is Tyron Woodley, who had set up a legitimate claim for being one of the greatest welterweights in history just a couple of years prior to boxing Jake Paul. And if he were to be led back into the UFC now, the first thing everyone would do, fighters and fans alike, is harp on the fact that he got absolutely decimated by a YouTuber, regardless of the context. And if he managed to actually look good again, the validity of MMA as a whole would immediately come into question, and Jake Paul himself would definitely fan the flames. Therefore, the only thing UFC wants to do now is forget that he exists, just like they would with any fighter fighter that lost to Jake, or any influencer for that matter. That's why the potential boxing match between Logan Paul and Conor McGregor was recently shut down hard by Dana White, even though both are under a TKO umbrella, and it would have been financed by a third party, making it extremely financially viable for the UFC in the short term. But Dana knew that the optics of Conor, who some have called one of the greatest strikers in UFC history, struggling against Logan Paul or even losing, would destroy the Conor McGregor brand and do a lot of damage to the UFC in the long term due to how intertwined he is with the company. And it's interesting how many MMA fighters fail to grasp that if they're gonna go and box against an influencer and do anything other than knock them out in the first round, their hopes for a UFC career are essentially over. Like Dylan Dennis, the man that still seems to somehow believe that the company that hasn't cut John Jones, Bryce Mitchell, or Conor McGregor refuses to give him a shot because he's too controversial.
And Hunter was just basically like, no, this guy just causes trouble. He's going to like cause too much trouble and we don't want that. He's too controversial with all this stuff. And I don't know like the exact words. I have all the messages, but basically just saying that I'm going to go in and make all this like hoo-ha and not fight or something like that. And he's saying like, I need to prove that I'm going to fight in MMA because I just, I'm too much of a liability if I hit someone on stage or all this stuff. And I'm like, at the end of the day, you guys want that, even though I'm not going to do that because like these side shows are like kind of, they're known for being a circus and me doing that. And so it came down to where he was like, we want you to fight to, you know, prove that you're an MMA fighter.
Regardless of whatever lies he's been told, anybody with two brain cells to rub together can understand that it's not the controversy that's the problem, but the fact that having him in the company after he spread his legs in the middle of the ring for Logan Paul after getting his ears boxed off would be an absolute embarrassment, and even more so if he managed to start winning. So to circle back to Nate Diaz, even though he's still a household name and he didn't look as bad against Jake Paul as some others did, him winning the title would be absolute stuff of nightmares for Dana, because not only would it make the company and his division look bad, knowing Nate, the first thing he would do after winning the title is call out Jake Paul to fight him in the UFC, which would put immense pressure on Dana to make a relatively winnable fight for Jake against an actual champion, which if he were to win would be absolutely catastrophic for years to come. So yeah, it's just not ever gonna happen. And I don't know why Nate would even put that out there, considering the fact that the UFC tried to make him fight Khamzat Chimaev on his way out when they found out that he was planning on boxing Jake Paul, in order to make him look as bad and over the hill as possible in case they needed an excuse for why he got knocked out. And it's funny because the concept of people making a sport look bad isn't anything foreign to Nate, as he was extremely vocal when the UFC brought in CM Punk.
It downgraded all the fighters, and everybody acting excited about it. Congratulations, CM Punk, congratulations, this guy's coming, but it's like, if I want to, I can't go. If I want to, I can't go play in the NBA. And even Stephen Struth's begging, he can't go play in the NBA if he wants to, because he feels like making a change. For a publicity thing, they wouldn't pay him no money and they wouldn't even let him play. It's ridiculous. We're pros, right? Like, I don't think you should just let some millionaire WWE guy just come on over and play a little game, like have fun with his career. I'm over here busting my ass and fighting for 10 years and doing my thing and having a serious job that I have to do for this, and you got this guy's gonna come over and probably get paid more than everyone in the room, and then I don't know if he'll do well. He might do great. He might do, but why does he get a chance? He's an amateur. You're gonna put an amateur in the pros. That makes us all amateurs. So I think it's ridiculous. And so as far as I'm concerned, him, the whole situation, and anybody who takes a fight is tripping.
So he should be able to understand perfectly well why what he's saying is so delusional. I think Nate is a big enough name for the UFC to bring him back for another fight against Conor, or another big name that's past his prime, but he will never be given a serious opportunity again. Not that he needs it, the man is 40 and rich, so he should probably just kick back and enjoy the fruits of his labor. The ultimate irony of it all is that the reason why influencer boxing even exists as a niche is largely because Dana and the UFC agreed to the crossover match between Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor in 2017, putting on one of the most financially successful events in history and inspiring a ton of copycats that wanted to cash in, ultimately creating the problem that they're facing today. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Like the video if you liked it, and if you want to see more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell next to it. And if you want to support the channel further, become a member by hitting join if you're on Android or desktop, or the link in the description if you're on iOS.
Last one for me. Conor McGregor says he still wants to fight in June, and he also mentioned he wanted to fight Nate Diaz in the Sphere on Mexican Independence Day. Do either of those two interest you?
I'm looking for Mexicans at the Sphere on Mexican Independence Day.
Nate?
Huh?
Nate Diaz.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I'm not doing that.